Everybody knows that we're in a mental health crisis. It's largely considered the number one public health crisis in the United States today. For people, their mental health issues are usually their number one burning pain point in their life. So I saw an opportunity to build Ketamine Therapy 2.0, allowing people to use the psychedelic medicine in the comfort of their own home.
All right, everyone, we've got Dylan. He's the founder and CEO of Mindbloom.
Mindbloom is the largest provider of psychedelic therapy in the United States today. Ketamine was this groundbreaking treatment for mood disorders like depression, anxiety. We've radically increased access to ketamine therapy treatment, making it available to 85% of Americans. Suicides and overdoses have become the top two leading causes of death for Americans under 45. That overdose and suicide death number is particularly personal and meaningful to me because my mother and my sister are part of those statistics. And for that reason, started Mindbloom with this mission to transform lives, to transform the world. Ketamine is going to transform the behavioral health system. Depression, anxiety, OCD, PTSD, addiction. Ketamine is actually incredibly effective for knocking people out of that. Ketamine is probably the best treatment for suicidality today.
All right, everyone, we've got Dylan. He's the founder and CEO of Mindbloom. And A, his company is amazing. B, he's got some amazing stories to share. And I can't wait for him to share it with everyone. So Dylan, tell us a little bit about Mindbloom from the top, and we'll kind of go from there.
Mindbloom is the largest provider of psychedelic therapy in the United States today. We help people achieve life-changing personal and clinical breakthroughs through at-home ketamine therapy for anxiety and depression. We've done two big things in Mindbloom that we're really proud of. One is we've radically increased access to ketamine therapy treatment by using telemedicine to bring the cost down 80%, making it available to 85% of Americans in 38 states, which is particularly important because 160 million Americans don't live in mental health coverage zones as it is, and really reduce the stigma and barriers by building the largest brand in psychedelic therapy and doing over 300,000 treatment sessions over the past 4 years. The second big thing that we've done is created products and services around psychedelic ketamine therapy to help people get the best clinical outcomes that have really ever existed in depression and anxiety. So just last summer, we published the largest ever peer-reviewed clinical study in 70 years of psychedelic therapy and 20 years of ketamine therapy history, along with physicians and researchers from NYU, UCSF, Cleveland Clinic, Houston Methodist, MAPS, who's running the MDMA clinical trials, demonstrating that our at-home ketamine therapy product is getting people a clinically significant improvement in anxiety and depression, like 40% more frequently than SSRIs like Lexapro, with 10 times fewer side effects, and even blowing the clinical outcomes of in-person ketamine, which are 5 times the cost, out of the water.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, but can you, I think the story that you have is really powerful. So kind of what's your relationship with psychedelics and how did this lead into starting Mindbloom?
So I'm a 3-time tech founder now. Built 2 other what I call world positive companies, creating changes in areas that are deeply personal and meaningful to me. And I left my last company after 5 years, which is still the market leader in space 5 years later, to start Mindbloom for a couple big reasons. One is I think everybody knows that we're in a mental health crisis, but not everybody knows that it's largely considered the number one public health crisis in the United States today, and it's getting worse and worse every day. So to frame the problem, we've got 1/4 of Americans, 1/4, have diagnosable mental illnesses, and that number is increasing. Depression is the number one cause of disability worldwide, and suicides and overdoses have become the top 2 leading causes of death for Americans under 45. Overdose and suicide death number is particularly personal and meaningful to me because my mother and my sister are part of those statistics. My mother and my sister were both severely mentally ill, schizophrenic, bipolar, addiction, and we tried all of the traditional treatment options that we could find to try to get them help, and ultimately none of them worked for them. We tried antidepressants, anti-anxiety meds, antipsychotics, talk therapy, group therapy, inpatient rehab, all of which was particularly challenging for us as a working class family and the 70% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck to afford access and even figure out what the hell to do. But it wasn't enough. My mother ended up spending 15 years homeless on the streets because we weren't able to help her or manage it before dying of a fentanyl overdose a couple years ago. My sister, I was essentially the same situation, on and off, housed by my father, and died of a fentanyl overdose last year, right after getting out of a 3-month inpatient rehab facility. And through those experiences, I lived in a very turbulent, chaotic, oftentimes violent home that undoubtedly left some what you'd call like lowercase t trauma ingrained into me. So I had a lot of issues with anger, a lot of issues with how I related to and interacted with other people, and just a really toxic and unhealthy worldview that showed up in terms of my mental health and well-being and the life I was leading. And for me in my journey, I ended up discovering MDMA therapy about 16 years ago, and MDMA fundamentally changed my outlook on the world and how I related to others, and really catalyzed a personal transformation to make me a much better person for myself and a much better person for the people around me. And for that reason, started Mindbloom with this mission to transform lives, to transform the world, to help people become happier, healthier, and more resilient versions of themselves, both for them, but for also the ripple effect that that would have on the people around them, their family, their community, and the work that they would do in the world.
Got it. Well, number one, I appreciate you sharing that story, and shows just how resilient you are, and how you're taking that trauma and how you're building stuff to have a positive impact on the world. In one of your answers here in an interview that you did, you mentioned that depression is the number one cause of disability worldwide after all, and overdose deaths have 5x in the last 20 years. So because my experience with MDMA, the first time I did it was in like I went to an EDM festival, right, when I was like 20 years old, and it was life-changing in that respect. But can you tell us how MDMA therapy is different than just taking it recreationally?
Yeah, so when I started Mindbloom in late 2018, and this is for ketamine, but it's going to tie into your question about MDMA therapy.
Yep.
What I saw was that ketamine was this groundbreaking treatment for mood disorders like depression, anxiety, but also a lot of research and studies around PTSD, OCD, and addiction, and other ruminative thought disorders. There have actually been over 100 clinical studies published on ketamine over the past 20 years, more than all other psychedelic medicines combined. But there are a couple big problems with ketamine. One was the access problem. It's like $600,000 a session, which my working class family could have never afforded for my mother, even if it was available back then.
You said 600,000?
$600 to $1,000.
Got it.
A session.
I was like 600,000 is really low.
That's a little pricey. Very few providers out there. Most Americans don't have access. A lot of fear and stigma. But another problem I saw was that it was stuck in what I called at the time ketamine therapy 1.0. It was often provided by an anesthesiologist or ER doctor, not a mental health care provider, provided in a sterile clinic or hospital room, looking up into some fluorescent lights with a needle in your arm. And 20% of Americans are needle phobic. So that's a huge issue for a lot of people. Not to mention that setting is really challenging for people, especially when they're about to undergo a psychedelic state. And third, maybe most importantly, there's generally very little to no, call it psychosocial support around the treatment. It's just a jab in the arm, send you on your way, hope it works, which it actually does. So I saw an opportunity to build what we call ketamine therapy 2.0, which is allowing people to use the psychedelic medicine in the comfort of their own home, where they're in a comfortable, safe, physical setting to sort of calm their mind. It gives them a psychedelic therapy modality to help them prepare for, go through, and integrate their experiences afterwards, and is actually delivered by mental health care providers. So Mindbloom specifically psychiatrists and psychiatric clinicians, along with a specialized coach that we call a guide. So I say all that to get to your question around what's the difference between taking MDMA and MDMA therapy. There are a few different permutations for what psychedelic therapy, whether that's ketamine therapy, MDMA therapy, or psilocybin-assisted therapy might look like. But generally it orients around 3 pillars. One is preparation for the experience, what you do before it. 2 is navigation of the experience, what you do during it. And 3 is integration of the experience, or what you do after. So for preparation of the experience, in a sort of MDMA therapy modality, what people will really focus on, and providers will focus on, is helping patients, one, make sure that they're in a really sort of calm, expansive, well-prepared mindset going into the experience. 2, make sure that the physical setting that they're doing it in, so where they're at, who they're with, is really comfortable. And 3, that people are sort of priming their subconscious mind before they go into the experience to help get the most out of it. That could be working with a provider or a therapist, or it could be what, say, Mindbloom clients do, which is writing out their intentions, like in a journaling exercise ahead of each experience. The second is navigating the experience, what you do during it. And so there's a definite skill set to getting the most out of a psychedelic experience, whether that's MDMA or ketamine or psilocybin. And so at Mindbloom, one of the things we train our clients in is to, it's called TLO, trust, let go, be open, which is also often used in MDMA therapy. So giving them something to hold on to around trusting that the medicine's high quality and it's really safe and efficacious and it's going to work for them, most likely. 2, teaching them how to let go as experiences come up and not get caught into ruminations. It's just to observe things coming and going and collecting those experiences. And 3, being open and receptive and not sort of resisting and fighting those experiences. To help people get the most out of that, usually what's done, and this is what we do at Mindbloom, it's also in the MDMA therapy protocol, is have people recline or lay down with an eye shade over their eyes closed, and headphones with a very particular and personalized and specialized music to guide the experience and overlay it. And so Mindbloom, through our mobile app, which is like Headspace or Calm, but for psychedelic therapy, there are a number of different programs and pathways people can select for different mental health issues they're grappling with. We have a bunch, and we're building out a whole library more, but things like anxiety, depression, grief, social anxiety, eating disorder, alcohol use, couples therapy, etc. And for every session, we have a library of guided sessions with different types of music and different types of spoken, guided psychosocial support content to help take people through that 1-hour ketamine therapy session. Or in the case of MDMA, it might be more like 3 to 6 hours. And then the third, arguably some of the most important or highest leverage part of the entire process is integration. So what do people do after the experience? So what we know about psychedelics is that they open what's called the critical period, essentially a state of neuroplasticity in your brain where you're much more easily able to rewire your brain in healthier ways emotionally, healthier ways behaviorally. And we want to help people leverage that neuroplastic state as best as possible. For studies show that for ketamine, that neuroplastic state can be about a week per session. For MDMA, it can be about 2 weeks. For LSD, 3 weeks. For Ibogaine, 4 weeks. It seems to correlate with the length of the psychedelic experience. And so when people are in this neuroplastic state after their experience, it's a prime time to help them actually get a lot of the benefits. And so we do that by helping people really dive into what happened during the experience and understand it and make sense of it. 2, helping people interpret what that means for them and what they're going to do about it. And then 3, helping them create actual action plans for how they're going to make changes in their life and be held accountable to them, so that they're not just having these interesting, neat experiences, but actually taking what they've learned and what's come up in this neuroplastic state and making, concrete changes in their life that'll help, propel them upwards.
Okay. And what are some, I guess, let's talk, you said it would be $600 to $1,000 for a typical type of treatment for ketamine, right? Like, what does it cost with Mindbloom, and how long is the treatment typically, all that type of stuff?
So Mindbloom starts as a 6-session treatment program. That's $195 a session. And that includes several hours of support from mental health care providers. So whereas a platform like HIMSS or Row that looks a little bit more like an online pharmacy, you might work with a doctor for 7 seconds or 7 minutes. Our clients are working with our providers on average 7 hours throughout the 7-session program. It also includes coaching from specialized coaches called guides. That's both in a one-on-one setting and also a group setting called integration circles, which are probably one of our most popular features, allowing clients to share about their experiences facilitated by a guide. We also have all that content that we talked about and a really active patient community of people sharing about their experiences and helping each other sort of get the most out of the experiences and share tips and tricks and share their mental health journeys. The cost for this sort of complete solution, not just the medicine, is $195 a session, so about 80% more affordable than the average in-person ketamine clinic when I started the company. And for clients who decide to continue on treatment for subsequent programs, that drops down closer to $120 per treatment.
Got it. And is there, and you guys, to be clear, so Mindbloom specifically focuses on ketamine treatment right now, yes?
Ketamine is the only legally prescribable psychedelic therapy in the United States today. MDMA is on track right now to be available to patients end of next year, end of 2024, and psilocybin is probably a couple years after that. So it's an exciting time.
Okay. So, well, let's say if you, let's say that the law was no object here, which one would be the weapon of choice in your mind?
So one, I'm not a clinician or a doctor, just I'm a tech entrepreneur, a psychedelic enthusiast, and a psychedelic therapy patient myself. So in my personal opinion, it would be MDMA therapy.
Okay.
I think ketamine is going to fundamentally transform the behavioral health system. Like, we see that ketamine is essentially a 10x better product than SSRIs and anti-anxiety meds and talk therapy. And for people, their mental health issues are usually their number one burning pain point in their life. Like our average client is 41 years old. We have more clients over the age of 57 in their 20s. And these are people who have suffered for a long time. They've tried a lot of things and nothing has really worked for them. That said, MDMA is so powerful in terms of the clinical outcomes it's getting, especially for things like PTSD, which are really challenging and tricky. And I think that ketamine has been slower to adopt because it has a lot more fear and stigma than MDMA. And so MDMA, I think, is going to sort of take the behavioral health market a lot faster and then also propel ketamine therapy behind it.
Yep. I remember there was I know Tim Ferriss dropped this video. This has to be like 5 or 6 years ago, but it was like 4 different people that had gone through different trauma stories, and they all went through MDMA therapy, and it was like 80% effective. And basically they would take the MDMA and they'd just sit with the doctor and then talk through, kind of similar to what you're saying, right? Kind of talk through what's going on in their head, and miraculously they were cured afterwards. So I do kind of believe that. And again, I'm not a doctor or anything either. I can just go through my experiences, so I can just say it's been a positive experience. Okay, and let's say you're to stack rank it, right? So you would put MDMA first. Would psilocybin come in second, or would it be ketamine?
So I think the way to think about it is that, like, different molecules or substances work for different people for different things. And so if somebody is stuck in a ruminative thought or mood disorder, which is how a lot of mental health issues look like, where they have built over time unhealthy neural pathways and patterns of these positive feedback loops. They feed themselves over and over again. They get worse and worse and worse. So this is depression, anxiety, OCD, PTSD, addiction. Ketamine is actually incredibly effective for knocking people out of that, especially depression. One of the benefits of ketamine is that it only lasts about an hour and is generally quite gentle. And so it allows people to sort of stack these neuroplastic windows, because they can do it more frequently, to get progressive outcomes. Something like psilocybin is more potent generally for people, and so it can help people who need like a really huge breakthrough do it, but there's a lot of friction just in terms of the intensity of the experience, in terms of how long it takes. And so ketamine can be used a little bit more as like an SOS system, right? Like somebody comes home and they're in like a deep dark state. They're having mini sort of relapse or episode, and the ketamine can help knock them out of it really quick. It's one of the reasons that ketamine is probably, based on the clinical research, the best treatment for suicidality today. Because you can get somebody who's having a suicidal episode ketamine very, very quickly and immediately, and it has these incredible remission rates. Example is after my sister died of a fentanyl overdose right after getting out of 3 months of rehab late last year. My father, who's my hero, was in a deep suicidal depression. He was incapable of leaving his room, showering, or shaving for 20 days straight. So completely debilitated. He was suicidal. He was texting me things like, here are all my passwords in case something happens to me. Here's where all the silver is hidden in my condominium in case anything happens to me, and would not let me come down and see him, and was taking a lot of steps that are, like largely considered people preparing to potentially commit suicide. So I had, talked to my team, with mental health care providers, and essentially put him in like a 50-50 chance to survive the next 1 to 2 months. The upshot was this was sort of the rock bottom catalyst that he needed to sort of take the leap and the plunge and try ketamine therapy through Mindbloom, which is something I've been trying to get him to do since the day I started the company. And it was nothing short of transformational for him. Within a couple sessions, he had remission from suicidality, which 63% of our patients who are suicidal have. And within several sessions, he sounded like a completely transformed person, exercising for the first time in years, eating healthy for the first time in years, decades, had started to develop goals around his relationships with others and like finding a partner, spending more time with his friends, organizing and decluttering his house, and just getting that activation energy for life. So that's something ketamine is extremely effective for and shows up in the clinical research. MDMA is extremely effective for trauma. There's a lot of studies around end-of-life care and palliative care for people who, are in a deep depression. It could be cancer. It could be because they're, in the twilight stage of their life. And psilocybin has been clinically shown to have transformational benefits to people's mental health and sort of coming to terms with it and finding meaning and purpose in their life. But we really still are just like at day one of figuring out like how to help people get the most out of these neuroplastic drugs, how to help personalize the medicine and really match like the right person to the right medicine for the right thing and the right way for them. And that's, a huge thing we're doing here at Mindbloom is, developing these products and services and trying to build applications to help maximize the outcomes and the quality of the experiences from these.
You said you've had over 300,000 customers. Is that what it is?
We've done 300,000 sessions.
300,000 sessions. Okay. Are you able to share any, because I gave an 80% number earlier, right? Like the success rate or however you quantify it?
Yeah, like I mentioned, we published the largest ever peer-reviewed clinical study in psychedelic or ketamine therapy history last summer. A lot of these studies usually have N's or number of participants of like 20, 30, 40, 50 if it's big. And ours was 1,247.
Okay.
We're actually running a study right now, a follow-on one that's going to be like 7 times larger, like nearly 10,000. It's truly massive. And so what this study showed is that when you stack at-home ketamine therapy up to other treatments, it's truly, like I mentioned, a 10x product. So for instance, talk therapy works for about 40% of people, which is about the same as a placebo. It's sort of it seems to be like there are like a small percentage of talk therapists that get people incredible outcomes. But in general, talk therapy doesn't work on average. Then you have SSRIs. So these are antidepressants, which 40 million Americans are prescribed, like Lexapro. And that's not much better. It works for like 40 to 47% of people. But the downside is that like 30 to 50% of people have severe side effects: weight gain, sexual dysfunction, insomnia, sometimes suicidality, sometimes severe anxiety. And you often hear from people, they also have severe emotional blunting that makes it, almost untenable to be on because they become sometimes a shell of their former self. In addition, antidepressants take 6 to 8 weeks to work. So if you're someone like my dad, where you're suicidal, you might not have 6 to 8 weeks for it to work. IV ketamine therapy in person, ketamine therapy 1.0 with sort of no psychosocial support, just jab in a hospital room, actually works for 50 54% of people. And at-home ketamine therapy with our protocol is working for 63% of people. So that's 20% more frequently than in-person ketamine and 40% more frequently than SSRIs. But when people hear about ketamine, they have the knee-jerk reaction like, wow, that sounds really dangerous though. So I think what surprises people isn't necessarily the efficacy, it's actually the safety of ketamine therapy and at-home ketamine therapy. So whereas SSRIs, people are having these really severe side effects like 30, 40, 50% of the time. Mindbloom patients are having side effects less than 5% of the time, 4.7%. And they're pretty light, like nausea, grogginess, a little brain fog for a few days. And the amount of clients having like an adverse event, so something more severe than a side effect, was like rounds to zero. It's like 0.3%, I think, all of which were resolved.
I know we only have a couple minutes left, so I want to go kind of rapid fire here. So
Hit me.
I'm looking at one of the responses here that you do. So the 5 things I wish someone told me before I started. So number 5 here, you put psychedelic therapy. And you said you do Mindbloom 1 to 2 times a month and another psychedelic therapy experience about 3 to 6 times a year. Tell us about the second part. What is the second part?
Yeah, I mean, I have my own psychedelic therapy practice. There are a lot of different things I've found that. So I often get asked, Dylan, what's the best mental health tool, technique, trick? And I think it's like similar. It's like asking what's the best exercise trick. Like it's really different things are going to resonate and work better for different people. And so to me, like the number one mental health habit or routine is really deciding that like your mental health and well-being is a number one non-negotiable top priority. And then from there, it's making that a big part of your life and actually prioritizing on other things and running experiments and tests to see like what works for you. And so for me, psychedelic medicine is like probably one of the 2 to 5 things that work best for me. And I have a sort of plant medicine and entheogenic practice where we'll use different plant medicines, whether it's ayahuasca or it's psilocybin, mescaline, to improve my mental health and well-being and have breakthroughs that improve not just how I feel and sort of level me up, but also how I show up for the people around me. I'd say like one of the biggest motifs that I have when I'm have these psychedelic medicine experiences is being reminded over and over again about the importance of my relationships, my relationship with my partner in crime, Allie, my wife, who's our head of engineering here at Mindbloom, it's fun, with my close friends, with my father, with my colleagues, and even just how I treat everyday people I interact with.
To be clear, Dylan, so your father is still alive?
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll never know if it was because of ketamine therapy or because of
Yeah.
Mindbloom, but he certainly was suicidal and I had him like 50-50
Okay.
chance of making
Yeah.
it.
From the beginning, my interpretation was like he passed too, but it sounds like this made a major impact. So it's good that we cleared that up.
Yeah. So my mother and my sister both died of fentanyl overdoses over the last couple of years. And potentially psychedelic therapy saved my father's life. And so it's pretty cool that I got to help at least one of my family members with their mental health issues.
Well, that's good. I'm glad you were able to help in that respect. And also, as we work towards wrapping, a couple minutes left, how do you pronounce it? Is it Vipassana Meditation? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
So silent retreats, read and study. I mean, I've read about these before where it's like 6 to 7 days, no technology, nothing. And you seem to be a pretty calm and collected guy to me. So tell us about that. I mean, tell us about how you've developed this calm demeanor, because you said you used to be pretty a pretty upset person, right? So
Yeah, I used to get like fist fights. I played football for 12 years. I would drink like 4 or 5 nights a week in college. And I was very like achievement focused. So I, on the surface would look like I had it together. I was valedictorian in my high school. I didn't get a B until college, like near perfect SAT score, captain some of my football teams, like captain the science Olympiad team. I would say psychedelic medicine was a big catalyst. So actually the first catalyst was discovering positive psychology. And for me, one of my big practices is actually studying and reading about call it mental health and well-being, philosophy, like how to live your life. And so some of my big influences are positive psychology, sort of Buddhism, Eastern philosophy, meditation, Stoicism, even like behavioral psychology and cognitive science, understanding our biases and how the mind works. I found to be very powerful. It's building a lot of psychological tools and techniques that I use day to day, if not moment to moment. But to your point about meditation, my story with meditation is I originally got into it like a lot of, probably your listeners get into it, was like, I feel like I could be even better at work if I like being a tech founder, if I started meditating. I hear it's a superpower. And so I had a few false starts, finally committed to doing Headspace for 45 days straight. I was going to do it 45 days straight. If it works, great. If it doesn't, I'm never going to try meditation again. I tried it, not for me. It was about 20 days in, I was going up and giving a talk in front of a bunch of potential customers. They're lawyers in my last company. And I started getting stage fright right before I went on, which I really don't get frequently. And I was like, oh, there's that meditation thing. I should give that a shot right now. So I closed my eyes and just observed the sensations of, my heart pounding, of like my skin kind of crawling, of like all the constricted feeling in my chest. It just sort of floated, went away, and I went up and crushed it. I was like, oh, this meditation has some legs.
Yeah.
But as I started going deeper down the rabbit hole, I started actually studying meditation, like reading books on it, which led me to actually studying Buddhism. And I think one of the things we miss sort of in Western society is sort of practicing meditation without studying the underlying viewpoints around it. And so I would like consider my sort of quasi-philosophical or spiritual viewpoints like a combination of secular Buddhism, like Buddhism without the religion, more around the meditation, humanism, trying to give back to this incredible human species, and hedonism, like trying to enjoy life as much as I can because I only get one of them. And that led me, sort of down sort of practice and study of Theravada Buddhism into Vipassana retreats. But your question, your statement around like, is this one of those retreats where you can't use your phone? I think what really surprises people is when they learn that like the idea of being silent during it is probably one of the easiest things you do. It's you literally, from the moment you wake up in the morning to the moment you go to bed at night, you're trying to meditate the entire time. Like every single moment you're meditating.
So I've read about this, Dylan. I mean, like a lot of people go crazy by like day 2 or 3, or like they tap out, right? So yeah, anyway, continue.
Well, I think my lovely, brilliant wife, Allie, and I, we've been talking about going for a while, and I had cold feet. She'd been to some weekend retreats. But then like just through my study of meditation, I got to a point where like I knew that the idea of getting to spend a whole week in practice would be like absolute bliss, and I couldn't wait to do it. So I think sometimes some of these centers like accept people coming in for the first time, and they don't having to build up the meditation toolkit. It's like kind of like throwing someone like on the field and like saying like football, like on the field in like full pads and like in the middle of a game, like a collegiate level when they have no idea what they're doing. It's like maybe like a little dangerous. So I was at one retreat where we're talking to one of the instructors and going around the table, and it's like one of 2 times you get all week to ask one of the masters essentially like questions. And someone raises their hand sheepishly and says, so what are we supposed to be doing like between the times we're meditating? Like between the times we're doing our 45-minute sets? And the woman's jaw drops and just like, if we've led you to believe you're not supposed to be meditating the whole time, we didn't give you enough instruction. And they're like, yeah, you didn't. You didn't tell anyone that. So, but yeah. Okay.
I feel like there's a lot to unpack there, but working towards wrapping here. So can you give us a sense? I mean, it sounds like this should just continue to explode, right? Like whatever you're comfortable revealing around how the company is doing or last couple of years, growth rates, whatever, would be keen to know.
Yeah, I mean, so as I mentioned, we're the largest provider of ketamine and psychedelic therapy in the U.S., but I still think we're at like day one. I think ketamine's, by our estimates, like 0.2 or 0.3% of the psychiatric drug market. So you see a product that's a 10x better product to people's like number one burning pain point. Like we just talked about, like suicide, overdose, top 2 leading cause of death for Americans under 45, like, 40 million Americans on antidepressants. And you just see what to me is clear as day is that psychedelic therapy is about to become the number one treatment for mental health care issues. So we have a long ways to go. But for us, we've grown from 0 to a few 100,000 treatment sessions in a few years. We've grown the team to 350 people, located all over North America, South America, the Philippines.
I mean, so Dylan, would I just do the math here? 300,000 sessions times 195 equals close to $60 million. Is that fair?
I mean, you can the math adds up.
Yeah. No, I think it's just going to get way bigger. And I think from this thing, are you guys still raising your Series C? I'm seeing Series B. Are you guys still raising money right now?
Yeah. So because of there's a couple of dynamics. So one, to me, this is my life's work. So if I wasn't building Mindbloom, I would just want to be building Mindbloom. It's in my ikigai. Like it really feels like an infinite game to me, where my goal is just to get to continue building it with incredible people and building incredible products and services to help other people. And I don't want to stop. And because the psychedelic market is so sort of new and early, and it's called Mindbloom, not Ketabloom, for a reason. Ketamine might be a footnote in the history of Mindbloom. It's just the first treatment that we provided. For those reasons, we've approached the market as being like really focused on like really rigorous, thoughtful capital allocation. So we've raised over 50 million from top VCs like Kleiners Perkins and Founders Fund, 8VC, and others, but still have like a majority of the capital. And we raised our Series B 2 years ago with several years of runway in the bank. And we've actually seen a lot of our competitors, like fast followers, who have sort of popped up, mimicked or sort of spun off a lot of what we've done, like come out, raise money, go out of business right away. There was one company in our space that incinerated $100 million of capital in like 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah, 2 years before MDMA was available. And so we've been taking like a more measured approach to, growth and building.
Got it. Well, congrats on your success. I definitely want to try this out myself. I definitely want to be a customer. And I think there's probably there's a longer conversation's probably warranted. But we can talk about that later. But Dylan, what is the best way for people to learn more about you and Mindbloom?
As part of my mental health care habit stack is that I don't have a lot of social media. So I can just be found on LinkedIn, where I post frequently on sort of business, entrepreneurship, and psychedelics. And Mindbloom itself is at mindbloom.com.
All right. Thanks so much for doing this, Dylan.
Absolutely. Thanks, Eric.